The merciless tropical heat blazed down across the Solomon Islands. Late 1943 had arrived. Nearly 2 full years had passed since war erupted across the Pacific. Far below stretched an ocean of endless blue. Hundreds upon hundreds of miles extended in every direction. Only scattered jungle-covered islands broke the monotonous expanse. High above at 20,000 feet, the air cut sharp and cold. The contrast struck like a physical blow against the sweltering heat waiting below. An American aviator occupied his cramped cockpit. His hands maintained their steady grip on the flight controls. His aircraft was a Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The distinctive twin-boom fighter sliced through thin air. Its dual Allison engines produced a low, continuous rumble. Hours had already elapsed since takeoff. His eyes never stopped their constant sweep across the horizon. He searched for any trace of hostile aircraft. The Lightning had been designed specifically for this mission profile. Long-range patrols across vast oceanic distances where mechanical failure meant certain doom. A single engine malfunction would spell death. But twin engines offered hope. A fighting chance to reach home base alive. Movement caught his attention through the scattered cloud formations ahead. Dark objects materialized against brilliant white. They moved with purpose and speed. Japanese fighters. Zeros. These aircraft had struck terror throughout the Pacific when hostilities first began. Nimble as hawks. Deadly as vipers. Their pilots had trained relentlessly since before Pearl Harbor burned. The American aviator felt his grip tighten around the control wheel. Stories from the early campaign days echoed in his memory. Tales of American fighters being outmaneuvered with ease, outclimbed without effort, shot from Pacific skies by these silver death dealers. But circumstances had shifted dramatically since those dark early months. One of the Zero pilots detected the approaching Lightning. Rather than diving for cover or radioing for reinforcements, he chose a different path entirely. He banked directly toward the American fighter. The distance closed with alarming speed. This appeared to be a direct challenge. Perhaps he viewed this strange twin-engine configuration as simple prey. After all, how could anything so large and cumbersome possibly compete with the legendary Zero's grace and deadly precision? The Japanese pilot had just committed a catastrophic error in judgment. Understanding what transpired next requires examining the beginning. Back when the P-38 Lightning existed only as revolutionary concepts on engineering drafting tables. Back when the Zero reigned as absolute master over Pacific airspace. The year was 1937. The United States Army Air Corps issued specifications for an entirely new category of fighter aircraft. They demanded something capable of rapid altitude climbing, something that could intercept enemy bombing formations before target acquisition. The technical requirements seemed to defy physics. They wanted a fighter reaching 20,000 feet within 6 minutes, maintaining top speeds exceeding 360 miles per hour, carrying sufficient firepower to destroy heavy bombers in single-attack passes. Most aircraft manufacturing companies studied these specifications with bewilderment. But at Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in Burbank, California, a young engineer named Clarence Kelly Johnson recognized opportunity. Johnson possessed brilliance, unconventional thinking, willingness to embrace calculated risks. He understood that no single engine then available could satisfy these extreme demands. His proposal was genuinely radical. Employ 2 engines instead of 1. The resulting design challenged every conventional aircraft principle. Rather than traditional fuselage construction, Johnson created a central pod, just large enough for pilot and weapon systems. 2 engines occupied booms extending rearward from the wing structure. These booms supported twin vertical tail surfaces connected by horizontal stabilizing elements. The appearance was alien. It seemed fragile. It looked like something that should never achieve flight. But on January 27, 1939, Lieutenant Ben Kelsey lifted the prototype skyward for its maiden voyage. Flight characteristics exceeded all expectations. The aircraft flew with surprising grace. 2 weeks afterward, Kelsey attempted establishing a transcontinental speed record. The flight plan called for California to New York in under 7 hours. Success almost materialized. Just moments before final approach, both engines failed catastrophically. The prototype crashed in twisted wreckage. Kelsey emerged alive, but the aircraft was completely destroyed. The Army had witnessed enough promising performance. They contracted for 13 service test aircraft. The Lightning program had become reality. Aerial warfare was about to undergo fundamental transformation. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, another revolutionary fighter was taking physical form. Japan's Imperial Navy established their own impossible performance criteria. They demanded a fighter capable of outmaneuvering any airborne opponent, flying greater distances than any carrier-based fighter ever constructed, still packing sufficient destructive power to dominate dogfights against land-based adversaries. Chief designer Jiro Horikoshi confronted these requirements with identical innovative determination as Kelly Johnson. His approach differed completely, but proved equally revolutionary. Remove everything deemed unnecessary. Armor protection added excessive weight. Self-sealing fuel tanks created unwanted mass increases. Horikoshi constructed an aircraft that essentially consisted of lightweight framework wrapped around a powerful engine. Just enough structural integrity to mount weapons and fuel storage. The finished product became the Mitsubishi A6M. Soon, the entire world would know it as the Zero. Its first flight occurred in April 1939, just months following the Lightning prototype. Performance exceeded every single specification. Turning radius surpassed anything else airborne. Climbing angles appeared to defy gravitational laws. Flight duration extended for hours without refueling requirements. Perfect for vast Pacific operational distances. July 1940 marked the Zero's combat introduction over China. 13 Zeros encountered a significantly larger formation of Chinese fighters. Within mere minutes, the Zero pilots achieved kill ratios of 12-1. Not a single aircraft was lost to enemy air combat. Japanese naval leadership experienced complete euphoria. Their wonder weapon had been discovered. December 7, 1941, brought Japan's attack against Pearl Harbor. Zeros provided fighter escort for the strike formations. American pilots surviving the assault reported encounters with enemy fighters unlike anything in their training experience. These aircraft could outturn P-40 Warhawks effortlessly, outclimb them without apparent effort. Early dogfights over the Philippines, Wake Island, and throughout Pacific territories found American aviators hopelessly outmatched. Simultaneously, P-38 Lightnings were beginning to reach operational squadrons. Early production models suffered significant problems. Cockpit heating systems failed at high altitudes. Pilots endured temperatures dropping to -50 degrees. Turbo superchargers providing the Lightning's high-altitude performance proved temperamental and unreliable. The aircraft's unusual flight characteristics demanded respect and extensive pilot training. But advantages became apparent as combat experience accumulated. Concentrated nose armament delivered incredible destructive power. Unlike wing-mounted guns requiring convergence at specific distances, the P-38 carried 450 caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon grouped together in the nose section. This meant every projectile traveled along nearly identical trajectories. Skilled pilots could destroy targets from thousand-yard distances, far beyond effective range of most contemporary fighters. Twin-engine configuration provided crucial safety over water operations. Engine failure or battle damage to one power plant allowed skilled pilots to return home on the remaining engine. This reliability gave Lightning pilots confidence to venture deep into hostile territory far from friendly bases. Extended range capabilities meant bomber escort to targets other fighters could never reach, or conducting lengthy patrol missions over vast oceanic expanses. Early 1942 found American Pacific commanders confronting genuine crisis. They were losing ground rapidly. Japanese forces advanced across Southeast Asia and Pacific Island chains with seemingly unstoppable momentum. American and Allied pilots displayed tremendous courage, but faced superior equipment and tactics. The Zero appeared truly invincible. Then something extraordinary occurred in the Aleutian Islands. June 4, 1942, during the Battle of Midway, Japanese forces launched attacks against Dutch Harbor, Alaska. The assault included Zero escort fighters protecting bomber formations. American anti-aircraft fire proved intense and accurate. Several Japanese aircraft sustained battle damage. One Zero, piloted by Petty Officer Tada Yoshikaga, took critical hits and attempted emergency landing on nearby Akutan Island. The landing sequence went catastrophically wrong. The aircraft flipped completely over in soft, marshy ground. Koga died instantly on impact, but the Zero itself remained largely undamaged and intact. American forces, discovering it weeks later, realized they had stumbled upon treasure beyond measure. For the first time, they possessed a Zero for detailed study testing and flight evaluation. The captured Zero was carefully recovered and transported to Naval Air Station North Island in San Diego. Engineering teams swarmed over every component, measuring, photographing, testing every system and subsystem. Test pilots flew repeated evaluation flights, pushing performance to absolute limits, learning strengths and critical weaknesses. Their discoveries revolutionized everything. Yes, the Zero could turn tighter than American fighters. Yes, it could climb at superior angles. But critical vulnerabilities were exposed. Lightweight construction meant destruction from even brief gunfire bursts. Lack of armor protection left pilots extremely vulnerable. Fuel tanks had no protective measures, making aircraft prone to fire when hit. Above certain airspeeds, the Zero's control surfaces became extremely difficult to manipulate. This limited effectiveness during high-speed combat maneuvers. This intelligence spread rapidly throughout Pacific commands. Pilots received completely new tactical instructions. Never attempt turning fights with Zeros. Avoid slow-speed dogfight engagements entirely. Instead, exploit your advantages. American fighters generally achieved higher-level flight speeds and superior diving performance. They were more robust, able to absorb battle damage and continue flying. The new combat doctrine became known as boom and zoom tactics. Dive from superior altitude. Execute quick firing passes. Use speed advantages to climb back up before Zero pilots could react effectively. The P-38 Lightning proved perfect for these tactical requirements. Powerful turbo-supercharged engines operated at altitudes where Japanese fighters struggled. Tremendous diving speeds could be achieved. Nose-mounted armament meant pilots could engage from long ranges during high-speed attack runs, giving enemies less reaction time. First P-38s reached Australia in April 1942, configured for reconnaissance missions. But combat-ready Lightnings didn't achieve significant numbers until late that same year. Results proved immediate and dramatic. The 39th Fighter Squadron, based in New Guinea, scored their first major victory on December 27, 1942. They claimed 11 Japanese aircraft destroyed, while losing just one Lightning. Pilots flying these early combat missions were veterans who had fought in P-40 Warhawks. They had learned through bitter experience never to engage Japanese aircraft in turning fights. Flying Lightnings provided them with machines matching their hard-earned tactical knowledge. They could engage on their own terms rather than enemy preferences. Japanese pilots experienced confusion and alarm encountering Lightnings. The twin-boom design appeared strange and alien. Early intelligence reports dismissed it as heavy, clumsy aircraft that would prove easy prey in dogfight situations. But combat reality proved dramatically different. Lightnings appeared suddenly from high-altitude positions, struck with devastating accuracy and firepower. Disappeared before Japanese fighters could mount effective responses. Psychological impact proved significant. Japanese aviators accustomed to dominating Pacific skies now found themselves constantly vigilant. Wondering when Lightnings might materialize, spring 1943 brought P-38 deployments in growing numbers across Pacific theater operations. Fighter groups in New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and throughout the region were re-equipping with Lightning aircraft. Pilots developed genuine affection for them. Twin-engine redundancy meant dramatically improved survival rates. Heavy, concentrated armament meant target destruction capabilities that other fighters could barely achieve. Extended range meant mission profiles that seemed impossible for single-engine aircraft. One particular mission would demonstrate Lightning capabilities while changing war momentum. American code breakers had intercepted Japanese communications revealing crucial intelligence. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor attack and Japan's most brilliant naval strategist, would be conducting inspection tours through Solomon Islands territory. Flight paths, timing, and aircraft types were completely known. This presented opportunity that seemed almost impossible to believe. If Yamamoto could be intercepted and eliminated, it would deliver devastating blows to Japanese morale. But mission requirements seemed nearly impossible, flying almost 1,000 miles over open ocean, timing intercept with perfect precision, engaging fighter escorts, returning with sufficient fuel reserves. Only one aircraft in Pacific theater could accomplish this mission: the P-38 Lightning. 16 P-38s from the 339th Fighter Squadron on Guadalcanal were selected for the operation. They departed on April 18, 1943, flying at wave-top altitudes to avoid radar detection. Navigation required absolute precision over featureless oceanic expanses with zero margin for error. Late arrival meant Yamamoto would escape. Early arrival would alert Japanese forces and ensure mission failure. Timing proved perfect. Yamamoto's transport aircraft, a Mitsubishi G4M bomber, approached coastline with its escort of 6 Zeros. The P-38s climbed to intercept altitude. Japanese forces were caught in complete surprise. Zero pilots scrambled desperately to defend transport aircraft. But Lightning pilots were experienced, aggressive, and absolutely determined. The brief, violent engagement that followed resulted in both Japanese bombers being shot down. Yamamoto's aircraft crashed into jungle terrain. The admiral died instantly upon impact. Psychological effects on both sides proved enormous. Americans realized no target remained beyond reach. The Lightning had flown combat missions that seemed impossible and achieved complete success. For Japanese forces, losing Yamamoto was like losing part of their national soul. Naval morale collapsed. The myth of Japanese invincibility suffered another devastating blow. As 1943 progressed into 1944, Pacific air warfare intensified dramatically. P-38 squadrons engaged Japanese fighters almost daily. Pilots accumulated kill scores that would have seemed impossible just 12 months earlier. Richard Bong, flying a P-38, became America's highest-scoring ace with 40 confirmed victories. Thomas Maguire also, in a Lightning, scored 38 confirmed kills. Charles McDonald added 27 more confirmed victories, all flying identical aircraft types. The P-38J model, introduced in mid-1943, addressed many early operational problems. Improved cockpit heating meant pilots no longer endured freezing temperatures at high altitudes. Better engine cooling systems improved overall reliability significantly. Most importantly, the J model introduced dive flaps, small control surfaces that helped manage aircraft during high-speed diving attacks. This addressed one of the Lightning's few remaining operational weaknesses. Japanese pilots learned to genuinely fear Lightning encounters. Intelligence reports warned them to avoid dogfight engagements with twin boom fighters. But sometimes, especially among younger, less experienced pilots, now filling Japanese ranks as veteran aviators, were lost in combat, the temptation to engage proved too strong. The Zero's early war reputation still influenced thinking. Some pilots maintained beliefs that agility and maneuverability would win any aerial engagement, which returns us to that critical moment over Solomon Islands territory. Late 1943, the American pilot in his P-38J was spotted by a Zero pilot who chose direct engagement. The Japanese pilot likely anticipated another victory, another confirmation of Zero superiority over American aircraft. He failed to realize warfare had fundamentally changed. Americans had learned from early defeats. The Lightning had evolved into something lethal. The Zero closed distance rapidly. The Japanese pilot probably planned getting behind the American aircraft, using superior turning radius to maneuver into optimal firing position. But the American wasn't following expected tactical patterns. Instead of turning to fight, he pushed throttles to maximum power and dove toward lower altitude. The Lightning accelerated rapidly. Diving away from the Zero at speeds the Japanese fighter could never match. The Zero pilot likely experienced momentary satisfaction, thinking the American was retreating in fear. He pushed his own aircraft into pursuit, dive attempting to follow. But the Lightning was pulling away steadily. Gaining speed increases faster than the Zero could possibly match. At high velocities, the Zero's control surfaces became heavy and difficult to manipulate. The Japanese pilot discovered himself in situations his training had never addressed. Then the American pilot executed something completely unexpected. At high speed, near the edge of aircraft limitations, he pulled back on controls and began a climbing turn. The Lightning, with its powerful turbo-supercharged engines, could maintain speed even while gaining altitude. The Zero, attempting to follow, began losing energy rapidly. Its lightweight design, perfect for slow-speed maneuvers, became liability at high velocities. The tactical situation had reversed completely. Now the American held advantages of altitude and speed. The Zero pilot, realizing his tactical error, attempted turning away, using superior maneuverability to escape the engagement. But timing had passed beyond recovery. The American pilot rolled his P-38 into attack position. High above the struggling Zero fighter, the Japanese aircraft was bleeding speed rapidly, its pilot desperately attempting to maintain altitude while tracking his opponent's movements. The Lightning, with twin turbo-supercharged engines, held every tactical advantage available: altitude, speed, position, and most critically firepower superiority. The P-38's nose housed devastating weapons packages: 4 50-caliber Browning machine guns and one 20mm Hispano cannon, all mounted together in the central pod structure. Unlike fighters with wing-mounted guns requiring calibration to converge at specific distances, the Lightning's weapons fired along parallel trajectories. This meant skilled pilots could engage targets at ranges that seemed impossible for other fighter aircraft. Up to 1,000 yards distance, more than half a mile separation. The concentrated streams of bullets and cannon shells maintained deadly accuracy. The American aligned his targeting solution perfectly. The Zero was positioned directly below his aircraft. The distinctive red circle markings on its wings were clearly visible. The Japanese pilot continued evasive maneuvering, banking left and right desperately. But his aircraft was too slow and too vulnerable. The Lightning pilot adjusted his control wheel forward slightly, fine-tuned his targeting solution, and pressed the firing trigger. 4 streams of .50 caliber fire converged on the Zero target, joined by heavier impacts of 20mm cannon rounds. Combined rate of fire proved devastating, over 4,000 rounds per minute. The Zero's lightweight construction, designed for agility rather than protection, offered zero defense against this concentrated firepower. Bullets ripped through thin aluminum skin structure, tearing into engine components, fuel tank systems, cockpit areas. The entire engagement lasted mere seconds. The Zero shuddered violently under projectile impacts. Pieces of structural components flew off in the slipstream. Smoke began pouring from engine compartments. The aircraft rolled inverted and began its final dive toward ocean surface far below. The American pilot observed just long enough to confirm results, then banked away, scanning surrounding airspace for additional threats. Static crackled through the pilot's headset. Voices from other squadron members cut through the interference. Position reports echoed back and forth. Contact confirmations filled the airwaves. The mission pressed forward around him. This deadly dance played out repeatedly across the vast Pacific. Day after day, between 1943 and 1945, thousands of similar encounters unfolded in the endless blue sky above scattered islands and open ocean. The Lightning had transformed completely. What started as an experimental machine with serious reliability problems had become a proven killer. Even more important than the aircraft's evolution was how American pilots had mastered its use. The early disasters against Japanese fighters were now history. The balance of power had shifted dramatically. Lightning pilots came from every corner of America. Farm boys arrived from Wisconsin wheat fields. City kids shipped out from California suburbs. Former mechanics left Detroit assembly lines behind. Each pilot brought different experience levels to the theater. Some had logged hundreds of Lightning hours before deployment. Others were still discovering the aircraft's strange quirks and hidden capabilities. But every pilot shared something crucial. They had absorbed the new tactical doctrine. Training that exploited every Lightning advantage while avoiding known weaknesses. Never get slow in a fight. Speed was everything. Altitude meant life or death. Make your attack pass at maximum velocity. Climb away fast before the enemy could react. When trouble came, find you. Dive hard and get out. The Lightning could outrun any Japanese aircraft in the sky. These painful lessons had been learned through bitter experience. Lives had been lost, learning what worked and what didn't. Blood had paid for knowledge in those early war months. Now this wisdom was standard training doctrine. Combat results proved the system worked. Pacific skies belonged to Lightning pilots by mid-1944. Fighter groups flying the twin-boom aircraft posted kill ratios that seemed impossible just 2 years before. The 475th Fighter Group earned their nickname Satan's Angels through devastating effectiveness. Operating from jungle bases in New Guinea and later Philippine airfields, they met Japanese aircraft almost every day. Competition between pilots ran hot, but stayed friendly. Everyone knew about Richard Bong, The quiet Wisconsin farm boy was becoming America's top-scoring ace. His Lightning carried the name Marge painted on the nose. His girlfriend's photograph smiled from beside the cockpit. Bong's combat style was simple and deadly effective. He believed in closing to point-blank range before firing. His Lightning sometimes flew so close to targets that debris from exploding enemy aircraft damaged his own plane. His accuracy with the Lightning's nose-mounted cannon was beyond legendary. Thomas McGuire flew close behind Bong in the scoring race. Another Lightning pilot with a more aggressive approach. Some called McGuire's style reckless. McGuire was determined to pass Bong's victory total. Their friendly rivalry pushed both men to incredible achievements. Bong had scored 40 confirmed kills by the end of 1944. Every victory came while flying the Lightning. McGuire was catching up fast with 38 confirmed victories. But the human price of this aerial warfare haunted everyone involved. For every famous ace, dozens of other pilots died in combat. Many simply vanished over the endless Pacific waters. Japanese pilots remained extremely dangerous opponents. Even those flying inferior aircraft with limited fuel supplies and minimal training could kill you. The Zero's reputation for incredible maneuverability was completely deserved. Any American pilot who forgot boom and zoom tactics might not survive the mistake. Forward base life mixed tropical paradise with wartime misery. Pilots lived in canvas tents, surrounded by thick jungle. Heat pressed down constantly. Humidity soaked through everything. Insects swarmed day and night. Occasional Japanese air raids shattered the monotony. Runways were often nothing more than cleared jungle strips. Pierced steel planking covered the dirt surface. The metal sheets rippled and flexed under landing aircraft weight. Maintenance crews worked around the clock in primitive conditions. They kept Lightnings flying despite constant shortages of parts and proper tools. Combat missions and daily life created stark contrasts. One moment, a pilot fought for his life at 25,000 feet against enemy fighters. Hours later, he'd be back at base, writing letters home, or playing cards with squadron mates. The psychological pressure was crushing. Some pilots flew dozens of missions without serious mental problems. Others broke down after just a few encounters with the enemy. Everyone handled fear differently, but nobody could escape it completely. The Lightning demanded respect and skill to master. Pilots had to learn unique handling characteristics that no other fighter shared. Twin engines meant dealing with asymmetric thrust when one engine failed. The turbo superchargers required constant, careful management. The control yoke was unusual in a fighter aircraft. Most pilots needed time to adjust. At high speeds, the aircraft could develop severe buffeting and dangerous control problems if pushed beyond safe limits. But pilots who truly mastered the Lightning came to love flying it. Twin engines provided safety margins that single-engine fighters simply couldn't match. Stories spread through squadrons about Lightnings limping home on one engine. Combat damage had destroyed the other engine completely, but the surviving engine carried the pilot safely back to base. The aircraft's exceptional range meant pilots could strike deep into enemy territory. They always had enough fuel remaining to reach friendly airfields. Concentrated firepower meant short bursts could destroy enemy aircraft instantly. The strategic situation had changed dramatically by late 1944. American forces advanced across the Pacific island by island. Each captured base brought them closer to the Philippines and eventually Japan itself. Lightning squadrons moved forward with the advancing forces. New bases were established on freshly captured islands. Each move extended their combat reach closer to the Japanese homeland. Japanese desperation was becoming obvious to everyone. Their supply of experienced pilots had been destroyed by years of constant combat. New pilots received minimal training before being thrown into battle against seasoned American pilots. Aircraft production struggled under relentless American bombing raids and critical material shortages. Fuel quality had deteriorated so badly that Japanese fighters often left visible smoke trails. American pilots could spot them from miles away. Some Japanese aircraft had even more serious problems. Poor fuel quality caused engines to backfire violently. Flames shot from exhaust ports in spectacular displays. American pilots sometimes thought they had damaged an enemy aircraft when they saw these flames. This led to overclaiming of victories in combat reports. But the overall reality remained crystal clear. Japan's air forces were declining rapidly, while American capabilities continued improving steadily. The Lightning J model equipped most squadrons by this point in the war. Nearly all early problems had been solved through constant engineering improvements. Cockpit heating finally worked properly in high-altitude combat. Dive flaps helped control dangerous high-speed descents that had killed earlier pilots. Engine reliability had improved dramatically through better manufacturing and maintenance procedures. Range with external drop tanks exceeded 2,000 miles. Missions that would have been impossible earlier in the war became routine operations. January 1945 marked a crucial turning point in the Pacific Air War. American forces were invading the Philippines against fierce resistance. The fighting reached incredible intensity levels. Japanese defenders committed everything they had against the invasion forces. This included their remaining experienced pilots, flying their best remaining aircraft. The aerial battles became some of the fiercest of the entire Pacific War. Both sides knew the stakes were higher than ever before. Thomas Maguire took off on January 7, 1945, hoping this would be his record-breaking mission. He was just 2 kills behind Bong, who had been rotated back to the United States for war bond tours. If Maguire could shoot down 3 Japanese aircraft in one mission, he would become America's new ace of aces. The mission went horribly wrong from the start. While engaging Japanese fighters at low altitude, Maguire violated one of the most basic rules of Lightning combat. He tried to fight a more maneuverable opponent instead of using his speed advantage. His Lightning stalled during a hard banking turn. At low altitude, there was no room to recover from the spin. The aircraft corkscrewed into the jungle canopy below. Maguire died instantly on impact. His death shocked the entire fighter-pilot community. His loss served as a grim reminder that the Lightning's technological advantages meant nothing if pilots abandoned proper combat tactics. Even the world's best aircraft couldn't overcome basic laws of physics when misused by overconfident pilots. Richard Bong survived the war and returned home as America's ace of aces. His 40 confirmed victories made him a national hero and household name. But his story also had a tragic ending that few people remember today. In August 1945, just as the war was finally ending, Bong was killed while test flying a new P-80 Shooting Star jet fighter. The engine failed during takeoff, and he didn't have enough altitude to bail out safely. On that same date, coincidentally, the first atomic bomb was being dropped on Hiroshima. By the time Japan surrendered in August 1945, Lightning aircraft had compiled an impressive combat record throughout the Pacific. They had shot down more than 1,800 Japanese aircraft. This was more than any other American fighter type achieved during the war. Over 100 Lightning pilots had become aces by scoring 5 or more confirmed victories. The aircraft had flown missions lasting 10 hours or more. They covered distances that seemed impossible for any fighter aircraft to achieve. But the Lightning's moment in aviation history had already passed. The war was over, and newer aircraft designs were rapidly replacing it. The P-51 Mustang, with superior high-altitude performance and simpler single-engine design, had become the preferred long-range escort fighter. Jets like the P-80 represented the future of military aviation. Orders for nearly 2,000 additional Lightnings were immediately cancelled when Japan surrendered. The aircraft that had been so crucial to achieving victory was suddenly completely obsolete. Most Lightnings were quickly scrapped after the war ended. Metal was desperately needed for peacetime production of civilian goods. There was no practical sense in maintaining thousands of fighters that would never see combat again. A few aircraft were kept for flight testing or static display purposes, but the vast majority simply disappeared from existence. They were cut up and melted down for scrap metal. Their aluminum was recycled into civilian products. Today, only a handful of flyable Lightnings remain in existence. They are carefully maintained by dedicated collectors and aviation museums. These survivors serve as flying reminders of their wartime service and sacrifice. The Lightning's legacy extends far beyond its impressive combat record statistics. It represented a crucial turning point in aviation history. This was when aircraft designers were willing to try radical new approaches to solve seemingly impossible technical problems. Kelly Johnson's unusual twin-boom design looked strange and unconventional to most observers, but the design worked exactly as intended under combat conditions. The concentrated nose armament proved its deadly worth in countless air battles. Twin engines provided safety and operational range that single-engine designs simply couldn't match under Pacific conditions. The pilots who flew Lightnings in combat never forgot their experiences with the aircraft. Veterans' reunions in the decades following the war always drew enthusiastic crowds of former Lightning pilots. They were eager to swap combat stories and remember fallen comrades who didn't make it home. They spoke about the aircraft's unique quirks with genuine affection. The way it handled on one engine after combat damage. The distinctive whistling sound of the turbo superchargers under maximum power. The confidence that came from having so much concentrated firepower at their fingertips. Japanese pilots who faced Lightnings in combat remembered the aircraft very differently. To them, it represented a decisive turning point in the Pacific Air War. The moment when American aircraft finally matched and then exceeded Japanese performance capabilities. The early war days when Zeros dominated Pacific skies gave way to a harsh new reality. Survival now depended on avoiding American fighters rather than actively seeking them out for combat. The Lightning, with its devastating speed and firepower, became a symbol of American industrial might and tactical adaptation. The story of that encounter over the Solomon Islands represents thousands of similar engagements throughout the war. The Japanese pilot who made the fatal mistake of challenging a Lightning to a turning fight paid the ultimate price for his error. Some Japanese pilots learned to respect Lightning capabilities and managed to survive the war. Others refused to adapt their tactics and paid for their stubborn mistakes with their lives. The aircraft itself was simply a mechanical tool, neither inherently good nor evil in nature. But in the hands of well-trained American pilots following proven sound tactics, it became devastatingly effective against enemy aircraft. What made the Lightning truly successful in combat wasn't just its impressive design features. Success came from the combination of good aircraft design, proven sound tactics, thorough pilot training, and hard lessons learned from early combat defeats. The pilots who climbed into Lightning cockpits in late 1943 and 1944 had the crucial benefit of hard-won combat experience. They understood exactly what worked in aerial combat and what didn't work. They knew their aircraft's specific strengths and critical limitations through extensive training. Most importantly, they had the confidence that comes from flying a machine they completely trusted. The mechanics and ground crews deserve equal credit for lightning success stories. Keeping these complex aircraft flying in primitive jungle conditions, often under enemy fire, required exceptional skill, total dedication, and constant improvisation. When proper replacement parts weren't available through supply channels, they made do with whatever materials they could find. When unexpected technical problems arose in combat conditions, they solved them through ingenuity. The pilots received public glory and recognition, but dedicated ground crews made everything possible. Looking back from our modern perspective today, the Lightning represents a specific evolutionary moment in military aviation history. It served as a technological bridge between the simple fighters of early war years and the sophisticated jet aircraft that followed immediately after. Its combat success came from recognizing that fighter aircraft didn't have to be small, nimble, and mechanically simple to be effective. Sometimes bigger aircraft designs produced better results. More engines meant more available power, greater operational range, and improved safety margins. Concentrated firepower meant more enemy kills per combat mission. Innovation and unconventional engineering thinking could produce combat results that conventional aircraft designs couldn't match under similar conditions. The Pacific Air War itself tells a broader story of adaptation and continuous learning under combat pressure. Both sides entered the conflict with fixed, preconceived notions about what tactics worked best in aerial combat. The Japanese military believed firmly in lightweight, maneuverable fighters flown by highly trained elite pilots using traditional dogfighting tactics. American commanders initially tried to copy those proven Japanese tactics and failed miserably in early encounters. But instead of stubbornly persisting with tactics that clearly didn't work, American military leaders adapted their approach completely. They developed entirely new tactical doctrines that played to their specific strengths: speed, concentrated firepower, aircraft ruggedness, and eventually overwhelming numerical superiority. The Lightning was perfectly designed and suited to this evolved combat doctrine. It couldn't outturn a Zero in traditional dogfighting maneuvers, but it didn't need that capability to win battles. It could outclimb, outdive, outrun, and destroy Japanese fighters with short, concentrated bursts from long range. Japanese pilots who recognized this tactical reality and adapted their own flying techniques could still be effective in combat. Those who stubbornly refused to change, who still believed in the mystical invincibility of the Zero and the supposed superiority of turning fights, inevitably paid the ultimate price for their inflexibility. Advanced technology alone never wins wars by itself. It provides tactical advantages that skilled people can exploit effectively. But technology never replaces the need for proper training, sound tactics, or personal courage under fire. The Lightning was an excellent aircraft design by any measure, but it required excellent pilots to achieve its full combat potential. The brave men who flew it in combat, who pushed it to its absolute limits and beyond, who learned from their costly mistakes and passed those lessons to others, they were the real key to its success. As the tropical sun set over the Pacific on that day in late 1943, the American pilot in his Lightning turned toward home base. Behind him, the Zero had disappeared beneath the dark waves. Only an expanding oil slick marked where it had crashed. He would report one enemy aircraft destroyed when he landed. Intelligence officers would add his victory to the growing tally. His squadron mates would congratulate him on another successful mission. Tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, he would climb back into his Lightning cockpit and repeat the deadly process all over again. The war would drag on for almost 2 more brutal years. More pilots would die on both sides in countless aerial encounters. More Lightnings would be built in American factories, flown in combat, and lost to enemy action. But the essential pattern had been firmly established by this point. Americans had finally learned how to fight effectively in Pacific conditions. The Lightning had proven itself as one of the most important tools that would help achieve final victory over Japan. In the grand sweep of world history, individual air combats like that one fade into statistical insignificance. Thousands of such deadly encounters happened throughout the long war. Each had its own specific details and personal human drama. But taken together, they tell the complete story of how air warfare evolved during World War II, how advanced technology and innovative tactics combined to shift the balance of power decisively, how brave people on both sides faced death in the skies, far from their homes. The Lightning's Japanese nickname, Fork-tailed Devil, reveals the psychological impact it created among enemy pilots. It was feared not just for its technical capabilities, but for everything it represented to Japanese forces. American industrial might operating at full capacity. Technological innovation solving complex problems. The rapidly growing skill and confidence of American combat pilots. Every time a Lightning formation appeared in Pacific skies, it reminded Japanese pilots that they were no longer the undisputed masters of their domain. Today, when we observe one of the few remaining Lightnings at an air show, gleaming brilliantly in bright sunlight as it performs low passes with that distinctive twin-engine rumble echoing across the field, we're witnessing genuine living history in motion. These surviving aircraft represent far more than just restored antique machines. They stand as permanent monuments to all the people who designed them, built them in factories, maintained them under combat conditions, and flew them against deadly enemies. They serve as tangible reminders of a time when the outcome of crucial battles could depend entirely on which side possessed better aircraft and knew exactly how to use them most effectively in combat. The complete story of the Lightning is ultimately about creative problem-solving under extreme pressure. Engineers faced seemingly impossible military requirements and created unconventional solutions that actually worked. Pilots faced superior enemies and learned new tactics to overcome initial disadvantages. Mechanics faced primitive operating conditions and kept complex machines flying through determination and ingenuity. Military commanders faced early devastating defeats and had the wisdom to learn from failures rather than simply repeating the same costly mistakes over and over. These timeless lessons remain completely relevant in our modern world. Technology continues evolving rapidly, but fundamental principles never change. True innovation requires taking calculated risks. Lasting success requires constant adaptation. Ultimate victory requires learning valuable lessons from temporary failure. The Lightning succeeded not because it was perfect in every way, but because the people who used it recognized its specific strengths, compensated intelligently for its weaknesses, and constantly sought practical ways to improve overall performance. As we conclude this story, it's worth remembering that behind every aircraft, every combat mission, every victory statistic, there were real human beings involved. Young men, mostly in their early 20s, who volunteered or were drafted to serve their country during its greatest crisis. They trained intensively, flew extremely dangerous missions, and far too often never returned home to their families. Those fortunate enough to survive were forever changed by their combat experiences. They carried lifelong memories of fear, tragic loss, hard-won triumph, and the unbreakable bonds formed with comrades under fire. The Lightning was their primary tool, their weapon, sometimes their salvation from death. It brought them safely home when single-engine fighters would have left them swimming in the vast Pacific Ocean. It gave them the confidence needed to engage an enemy that had seemed completely invincible. It helped them achieve ultimate victory in one of history's most challenging and demanding theaters of war. For that reason alone, the Lightning deserves to be remembered not merely as an aircraft, but as a lasting symbol of innovation, adaptation, and the human spirit's ability to overcome even the most daunting challenges. The twin-boom fighter that Kelly Johnson first sketched on his drawing board in 1937 became one of the most successful and distinctive aircraft of World War II. Its story is fundamentally America's story. Bold creative thinking, massive industrial capability, tactical flexibility, and the courage of ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things under impossible circumstances. Somewhere in the endless sky over the Pacific, preserved in the memories of those who flew and fought there, the Lightning still flies its missions, still strikes from high altitude, still embodies everything a fighter aircraft should represent. That Japanese pilot who foolishly taunted the Lightning learned his fatal lesson too late. The war had changed completely. The Americans had learned and adapted. The fork-tailed devil was here to stay until victory was achieved.